Today's date is 12 November 2022. I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia, conducting an interview with Eugene King.
Yes.
Sir, thank you very much for sitting down and talking to us.
Okay.
Get a little bit of background on you. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up, go to school, that kind of thing?
My father was in the Navy. He was a naval aviator. I was born in Pensacola, Florida.
Okay.
He was stationed there. And of course, he went through the war. He commanded a DE, destroyer escort, the Albert T. Harris.
Okay.
447 was it. So, military background.
Yeah. So other than your dad, you have any other family members that were military?
My brother went to Naval Academy, but it didn't stay in.
Okay.
But,
and you joined, what branch of service were you in?
Army.
Army?
My football coach in Granby in Norfolk, Mr. Brown, was a colonel in the reserve, so
right.
He came by one night, picked me up, and said, "Come on down," and swore me in. So went to the Gap one summer, and then I got into ROTC.
Okay.
So I got credit. I didn't have to go back to.
Yeah. What year did you join?
1954.
Were you enlisted or?
Yeah, I was initially. I was a PFC aircraft. Yeah.
And then you got a commission?
Yeah, I got commissioned in '59 out of VMI.
Gotcha. What war or conflicts you participate in?
No, Vietnam.
Vietnam?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 years.
3 years.
3 tours.
3 tours.
Yeah.
What prompted you to join the military? And what was the motivation?
When I went to summer camp at Fort Sill, I came out second in my company, I guess, and they offered me a regular Army commission when I got back. They said, "Well, you did so well, we get you up." I said, "Well, I didn't have anything going for me really." So I said, they said, "Oh, you can go to Europe for 3 years." I said, "Oh, sign me up." So that's just kind of fell into it. And then I got in, and then I got married and had the child, and by that time I made captain, and
I see.
So there I was.
You made it a career?
Yeah.
What was your MOS?
7/11/93. So it's airborne artilleryman. 7, I guess was it 7? Yeah. 11/93 was artillery. Field artillery. I also went to Ranger School, but we didn't have any Ranger units in those days, so it was just a tab.
Yeah.
And,
I got you.
But I did serve in I served in the 82nd, and we had one brigade in Germany, in Mainz, Airborne Brigade. So I was on status there for a couple of years.
Yeah. Where'd you go to basic?
I was always Fort Sill, always the artillery school. Went, reported in for duty. Went, I think it was a 9-month course.
Okay. And
then I went Airborne Ranger, and then Germany, and came back again to Sill for the advanced course. And that was probably the last time I went to Sill.
So was the Ranger School something you wanted to do? Is that something you put in for? Did somebody suggest it to you? What's the story of that?
If you took a regular Army commission, you had to either go Airborne or Ranger.
Okay.
Well, I selected Airborne. We got down to Benning, and of course we were hot shots. We were running around and we were in good shape. And so some of my buddies said, we're going to Ranger School, why don't you go? So I went over to personnel, said, "Can I go to Ranger School?" And they said, "Sure." So, again, kind of just fell into it, because I had some buddies going there.
Eventually you would find your way into Vietnam. What was your first tour?
In 65, they were going into this Psy War thing. It was a big deal. So for some reason, I went to the Psy War school there at Bragg and studied. We had a culture studies and some language studies.
Right.
And so it was a Psy War assignment. And I was assigned to, in I Corps, Quang Tin Province, below Da Nang. Quang Nai Quang. It was Tam Key was the name of the province headquarters.
Yeah.
And that's where I was assigned.
Yeah.
So we worked with a lot of refugees. I worked with Chu Hoi was a big program. I spent a lot of time on that. Of course, projects. We built schools, I finally got a hospital approved in Tam-Kee. We did a lot of little medical centers.
Okay.
But we had a lot of refugees, and I'd get all this stuff in from agencies, USOM, USAID, and I had to make distribution. It was
okay.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your first impressions when you got to Vietnam?
Well, I remember looking out of the airplane and seeing the Mekong, and we landed in Tan Son Nhut, and it was, guys riding around on forklifts with bandoliers and
right.
And then we drove through town, and it was a little shocking because it was borderline third world.
Yeah.
Third. I have one of the pictures I gave the gal inside was a boy with his pants down, going to the bathroom. Yeah. Well, I took it off the bus, so they were still in that, and that was in Saigon. So we got out in the country, it was worse.
Worse.
Yeah. But no, it was a little shocker, but got used to it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So.
What were where did you stay when you were the first time you were in Vietnam?
Well, I was in Tam-Kee, and we had a little compound, and of course I had a little hooch with another guy, another lieutenant or captain, I guess he was, and we'd go out during the day and come back at night. But mostly work with the province, but sometimes we'd go with the districts and even go out to the hamlets. If we'd have things like med caps where you'd get a medical detachment, we'd get maybe a squad or platoon for security, and we go with the district chief. We go out and get with the hamlet chief and try and collect intelligence on what the VC were doing.
Yeah.
And but of course it was in during the day and home at night. Because in the contested areas we didn't control at night. They could. We had RFPF, little guy, maybe a squad with carbines and a radio and not much else.
Yeah.
And if they were hit hard, they just beat him out. They took off. They couldn't really defend anything, so the VC could overrun the hamlet at night, and which is what they did.
Right.
But did a lot of. Actually, got an air medal for flying a lot because we'd drop leaflets and we had speakers, and I'd get some of the Chu Hoi to make a tape, and we'd go over and fly over their village or their hamlet and say, come on in, we have, things would be better if you, and a lot of them did, or quite a few of them did. So, but let's see, a story on Tet. We got a lot of these bite for a burst of flavor, the little candies.
Yeah.
So I'd mimeograph the thing from the province chief, a happy Tet or something, and we'd staple it. Well, I was in L-19, and what we'd do is we'd fly out in the contested area, and if we'd see some people, we'd dive down, not throw them out the window. Well, it was the only time I ever got sick in an airplane, because he was, doing like this. But so anyway, that was another thing I did that I was proud of and still am. I'd run into a lot of hair, lip, cleft palate deformities, and I made a contact at Da Nang at China Beach. We had a big military medical facility, and when we didn't have anything going, there were doctors sitting around bored to tears. So I would take 2 or 3 of them up to Da Nang, and they would fix them, fix it. And now I also have to admit I use some of them for propaganda. We'd take a before picture with a farmer with 2 of his kids, and then I'd take an after picture, when they'd been repaired, and I'd make a leaflet, and we'd drop the leaflets.
Okay.
Propaganda.
Right.
So, but the last day I left, we had a boy in the refugee camp that had club feet.
Yeah.
feet were turned under.
Okay.
And I got him to Da Nang, but I was departing. But as far as I know, he got the surgery and should have straightened his feet
Right.
out. They said they could fix them without a problem. So another story, which my last day, I'll wind this up. Agent Orange. You know, they talk a lot about Agent Orange Spring.
Right.
We had a little, it was called a pineapple forest. It was very close to province headquarters. They could actually take a recoilless rifle and shoot and hit province headquarters. So we said, you know, how can we get them out of there? So I said, well, we'll get some spray planes and we'll spray it, turn it all dark brown, and then they won't be able to function.
Right.
So the call sign was Ranch Hand. So I set it up. They like to fly in the afternoon, around 4 or 5, when the wind had died down. And I've heard all these stories about flying high. They didn't fly high. They came in very low, and the ones that came that day were in a pair. There were 2 of them, and so I called, and I guess I had an Air Force liaison guy, and he was talking to them. And they said, "Oh yeah, we're coming in." So they came in over Highway 1 and started spraying, and they said, we're taking hits. So they pulled up, went away, said, we'll be back tomorrow and we'll bring some help, some close air supporters. And so the plan was if they start getting shot at, they'd throw red smoke and then they'd peel off. And I don't know, I think they were Canadian, they might have been Australian Canberra bombers. They were Canberra 2-engine light bomber, I'd call it.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were on station. So they came over and said, okay, we're coming in. The lead plane called, I'm taking hits. Well, I'm sitting on a hill with the province chief, battalion commander, and a couple other Vietnamese officers. And the hang plane hits in the rice paddy, blip, 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 up against the rice paddy. So it's probably less than a mile away. I mean, we could see it. You know. Yeah. So they had a 3-man crew. It was a C-123. So I turned to the battalion commander, the Vietnamese, said, you know, we need to get them down there and get. All of a sudden, he didn't speak. Mui him lam, tai we mui, very dangerous.
Right.
So, oh, thanks a lot. So we called Chula, which was down the road.
Okay. And
they had a couple of choppers on standby all the time. So they came, took about 30 minutes and got them out. And so we laid on a flight from Da Nang. They were going to come and bomb the airplane, you know, it was the next week or sometime. Well, they come over, boom, 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 and fly. Well, the airplane's still sitting there. So again, and what prompted this was the day I took off, I looked out the window and there was that C-123 still in the paddy, still sitting there. So, but that was my best tour. The second tour, I went back with the 82nd. We landed at Chulai and worked up through Da Nang, Hai Bang, and we're at Phu Bai. And we got this was Tet 68.
68.
Yeah. So we got into it. The Marines had done all the heavy lifting. I mean, they had cleaned that way pretty much. So by the time we got up there, we caught a North Vietnamese battalion. They crossed Highway 1. They crossed the road into the open area, the coastal flat, you know, between Highway 1 and China Sea. And they called in and said, you know, we got them. So we started shooting artillery, and we put, you know, some company surrounded them and pretty much wiped them out. I think we got a North Vietnamese sergeant major and somebody else out, but the rest of them didn't make it. So pretty hot action, you know, and we hadn't been in the country that long, so it was, but what else? The problem I had with the 82nd, or not the problem, but what I saw after being with the Vietnamese was that we were operating out in the backwoods. You know, we were working towards Ashow Valley. We had our fire bases. And we put 175 guns in that could shoot interdict in the trail through Ashow. But we didn't coordinate with the Vietnamese. You know, we were out there doing an operation, and there's somebody else doing an operation. It's a Vietnamese regular army unit or something. And so that bothered me a little bit, but we never hurt anybody. So we operated far enough in the back so that, you know, anybody that was out there were bad guys. So. But that was an interesting tour. Just a sidebar. They hit us one night pretty hard at our base camp there at Phu Bai, and so the next day we went out and I think we killed about 100. I don't think we had anybody killed. We had a couple wounded. But they'd been telling us all along, the Viet Cong are starving, and they've all got malaria and this and that. And I go out and here's this guy, about 6 feet tall. I got on his Viet Cong sandals. He got a medical bag, a rice roll. He daubed himself up with dye, and a big muscular rascal. Damn, that looked like he's starving to me.
Yeah.
So that was. They would rocket us all the time with the 122s, and it was scary. And but mostly they just flattened tires because they'd hit and I'd go over in the motor pool. Jeep tires, or the tires would be flat on the deuce knives. But now and then they'd hurt somebody, but not very often. Third tour was in Saigon, and I can't tell you much about that.
Where was that?
That must have been 71. I worked with 7th Air Force. We were at MACV headquarters. General Lavelle was the Air Force commander, of course. We briefed in the MACV headquarters. They would brief. They had 4 corps. They would brief each corps, and then we would brief the air, in-country air. We didn't brief out-country. So anything that we'd had in the corps. And our job, we were over at 7th Air Force headquarters. We would get the requests from the corps every day. They'd say, we need, 10 sorties or 20 sorties. Right. We had a battle going on, we need more. And so we would get flight from, I think the Navy could put up about, off of Yankee Station, they could put up about 77 a day, singly. Now they could turn if they wanted, if we had a hot, they could send it back, but normally we'd frag about 77, and we'd divide them up if there wasn't anything going on, and they would develop targets down at Province, and they'd send them to Corps, and Corps would send them to us. A lot of that was just, they were bombing trees and stuff. Now, when we got into a hot firefight, of course, they would come in and really do what they were supposed to do. And, like I said, Saigon was an interesting place, and I liked the Vietnamese. I liked I worked with them, and I got to know them in Tam Kỳ. And once they knew that you cared for them, they would respond. But we had a lot of people that didn't treat them with respect. They had a lot of derogatory things to say about them, slope stinks, crap like that, which I didn't go for. But anyway, those 3 tours, and of course the wartime is, of course, the best time of my military service. Yeah. Most exciting. I don't know if people understand that going to war it's exciting. Yeah. It's get up every day and don't know if that's the day. Yeah. So anyway.
What, were you married at the time?
Yes, I was. Oh, yeah.
How do you keep in touch with family while you're
I
over
made little recordings we'd write letters, but I also had a little tape recorder.
Okay.
And I'd make a tape and send it to her and share it.
Reel-to-reel tape?
Yeah. We had the small one, and then I was thinking about it when I was coming over here. I had the big reels, the big Panasonic the tennis on anyway. And I made some tapes with my interpreters where they sang and this and that. I don't know if they have a tape, but I might get that and bring it over to them, just let them listen to it. No, I got back and got divorced. And they said, some people asked, why'd you get divorced? I said, well, I was gone too long.
Yeah.
And my wife got lonely and found somebody else. So.
Yeah. What about recreation, downtime?
In Tam Key, we would go over to high school and play volleyball with the kids, and of course they were 5 feet too, and they
Right.
whip us,
Right.
whip us to death. And we didn't have much at Tam Key. There was not much recreation. Well, it was with the 82nd, same thing. We did a little volleyball, but we worked long, kind of long hours. And,
Yeah.
And then, in Saigon, we had the Vietnamese take chua. It's lunch. It's from noon till 2.
Okay.
So we would go over to the gym, and they had a racquetball court. And so I had a buddy, another major, Laspina. We'd go over and play racquetball. And the thing I remember about the racquetball court was it was concrete. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, because it was so hot, the perspiration, the concrete would get slippery, and you had to be careful not to fall and break your hand or your elbow. But we played racquetball. That was about all. Sunbathing, a little sunbathing up on the roof, and no, I enjoyed Saigon. It was, again, we were working. We'd work till about 5 or 6, and then we'd go back to BOQ.
Right.
So drink some gin and tonics.
You wounded at all? Were you wounded
No.
in any of your tours?
This is something I've never said that I think. When I was in Germany, I got my German jump wings, and I met the brigade commander and the brigade sergeant major Janke. They had jumped at Crete, and Janke had broken his back. He landed on one of those concrete, they have in Germany, those stone road signs, 2 kilometers. And Colonel Towson, who had been the brigade commander, had been shot through the stomach. But they had, are you running out of tape?
No.
They had recovered, and they were now back in the Bundeswehr.
Okay.
And so I went down and jumped with them in Mengen and got my German airborne wings, which they jumped in the middle of the night. Now, at Bragg, we had to do night jumps, but that was as soon as the sun went down, that would go. So they didn't like to jump in the middle of the night at Bragg. It was, it took too much time in the Air Force and the plane, but the Germans did. But what was the point I wanted to make? What was your prompt about?
I asked if you were wounded.
Oh, no. Oh, the point I want to make. I have a recommendation to the Army Chief of Staff. We need, like the Germans had in World War II, we need to have a silver and a gold Purple Heart. I saw a number of instances of awards of the Purple Heart for scratch.
Yeah.
I bought a Ponzi stake over here. A week before, captain supposed to rotate, infantry captain. They come in, I stepped in a Ponzi trap. Well, I was pretty naive. I didn't realize that getting a Purple Heart had advantages later on. I didn't, dumb on me. But I saw that. I saw a silver star given for pulling a dead body out of the Perfume River. Under with no regard to himself, and he was 200 yards from our base camp with his driver. So, but I think we should have a silver award for a light wound and a gold for a serious, debilitating. Guys that lose a leg or IEDs and stuff should get.
Something different.
But some of the other guys, I saw a little too much of that to last story, and then we can go. Well, I went when we landed at Chulai with the 82nd. I went up ahead. The brigade commander knew I'd been to Chulai, I'd been in Tam Key, and so I flew up to arrange artillery support for the road convoy to Da Nang. So I wound up in Da Nang, and at night I was it was kind of a tent BOQ with, well, they shot the hell out of the place with rockets. So here I am in a strange place. I got a 45. So I run out, it's hard to explain when the machine, stuff hitting the building, the tin roof, lights flashing, rockets coming in. What do I do? So anyway, I ran out, and in the dark, I ran into, I'd call it an engineer hole they use for tents. It's big metal, and they drive them in. Well, the head of the thing had mushroomed out, and it's pretty wicked, Well, I ran into one and scraped my leg, my hip. Of course, I don't even know that I felt it when it happened. But we had a little fighting trench there, a little communications trench, jumped in.
Yeah.
We waited, and 30 minutes or so, everything quieted down. But the next morning I went over to the medics, and they, cleaned it and bandaged it. I didn't think a whole lot of it. But when I got back with the battalion, my battalion commander, unbeknownst to me, put me in for a Purple Heart. And so I used to go over, it'd be a brigade at night. We'd have one officer over there, artillery officer or somebody, in case they needed to call in some fire. But I'd go over and we'd play cards, with the brigade S3, and the brigade play poker,
Right.
nickel dime poker. And but when it went over, he said, I guess I was a major. He said, Major King, he said, I got a Purple Heart on my desk. He said, what happened? I said, well, it was a rocket attack when I was up here, setting up the artillery coordination, and I ran out in the dark and ran into an engineer state. And he said, do you think you ought to get a Purple Heart? I said, I haven't got any idea, boss. So the infantry didn't like to give other people, they didn't like to give them combat, the combat award, combat
Right.
infantry badge.
Yeah.
They didn't like to give them medals. They considered that kind of or that was a feeling I had.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was universal, but he said, well, so that was my one chance at the Purple Heart. I never thought anything about it. So,
What changes did you see in Vietnam, from your perspective, from the first tour to the last? You were there early.
Yeah.
And then,
I saw the spectrum, of the province, district, hamlet, and the regular Vietnamese army and the provincial troops, the RFPF,
right.
Nea Phong Quang, Dia Quang. They were the province, and they had platoons, but mostly they were just little squads of lightly armed. They lived in the hamlet, so they gave them carbines and a radio and said, if anybody comes, call it. By the time I got to McAfee headquarters and we were briefing, I kind of knew that the Vietnamese had not been able to energize the people. We now see the Ukrainians willing to fight,
Right.
hard. The Vietnamese, you go out in the hamlet, all they wanted was leave me alone. I got my water buffalo, I got my thatched hut, and my children are going to school,
Right.
so don't mess with me. There was no nationalistic fervor to whip or stop the North Vietnamese.
Right.
So I knew it wasn't going well, but I didn't think that it would have ended as badly as it did. I didn't know that, it would collapse,
Right.
even though. Anyway, but no, there was something missing, and it was the real nationalistic fervor of the part of the Vietnamese. They just didn't have it, as far as I could see.
Vietnam was not a popular war towards the end. Protests and all kinds of stuff going on in this country. Is that something that you guys paid attention to when you were over there? Did you care about it, or you just had a job to do and whatever they wanted to complain about, we'll let them do it?
I didn't hear much about it, didn't care much about it, wasn't interested. We were there to kind of do a job, and we tried to do it as best we could. My second wife happened to be a war protester. I found out later. She said, "Oh yeah, we used to go down. We were anti-war and this and that."
Right.
The stuff about coming home and being spit on. In fact, I think my last time I came home, the airline gal came back and said, "Would you like to go up to first class?" I said, "Yeah." So, they took me up. I got a beer. So.
Yeah.
No, I didn't experience any of that. Of course, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, kind of military towns. Okay.
So you had no issues.
Yeah. You had enough?
You brought some stuff, some newspaper clippings with you to donate?
Yeah.
Any of these stories have a personal connection to you at all?
Oh, sure.
And there's one here that says entire Viet Cong village defects.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
When I was at Tam Key, the Marines were at Chu Lai, and they had an operation. I think the Marine was General Platt, but they came up, set their headquarters up right next to province headquarters, and they weren't, they were out searching. They wanted to get in the firefights. They wanted to find some people to fight, and they couldn't find them. So I had a Chu Hoi returnee. He said, "Oh yeah, he'd heard they were operating in his village." So
Okay.
I put him in my Jeep, took him over to the Marine headquarters, took him in, said, "This guy says he'll go back and make a loudspeaker, or if you land him, if you secure him, he'll tell the people to come on out." Well, I forgot how many, but I went over and they were bringing them in by helicopter, and they had their pigs tied up and their chickens tied up and their pots. But I think several hundred came out, and we put them in. We had a refugee camp there at the province headquarters.
So he comes over. He wants to defect.
No, he had defected. He was in the Chu Hoi Center.
Okay,
But
and
he came to me and said, "Look, I've heard they're operating."
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they would come out. So
So they did.
they did.
It was
Yeah.
276.
Oh, all
That's a
right.
lot.
I know it was quite a bit, but
And you've got another one that's 2 Air Force jets and 2 MiGs tangled in the north.
that's probably just stuff that was always.
Is that on the back?
Yeah. No, they were always. When I was with 7th Air Force, I used to sit in the operating, in the command center, and what would happen, or I don't know if it was that one, but I remember one day, if our Air Force jets missed the tank, if they missed the tanker, they couldn't get back.
Right.
So I remember they called in and said, bingo fuel. So they split. One of them went towards, I guess, Laos, and the other one said, "I'm going to the ocean." Well, he got to the ocean's edge, punched out, landed on the beach, and made it to about 2 days later, he was in the Hanoi Hilton. I think the other one got out somehow, but no, we used to watch the North Vietnamese would bring their jets, their MiGs, down to Vinh, which was a southern airfield.
Okay.
And we could watch them, and when they would take off, they would alert the Air Force. They said, we have two MiGs rolling at Vinh, so we'd send some people up from either the carrier or off Yankee Station or from Da Nang to intercept them. And it was there's a long story about this and that and how they snuck up. And we'd get one of theirs, and they actually got several of ours. They would slip in and.
Right.
But mostly they would run. The North Vietnamese pilots were smart enough to take off, go back home.
Yeah. Now this is something. What is this?
Okay, I think, we made a lot of leaflets, and so did they. When they would overrun a refugee camp or something, they would distribute leaflets. I'd have to have this one translated. My Vietnamese isn't good enough, but they would say, stop dropping noxious gas and kind of stuff like that.
Right.
But I think this is one of theirs. But
it's propaganda leaflets.
Sure, they were all, when you read them, it was, the translations were kind of funky.
Right.
Right. But
where's your career head after you returned from Vietnam for the last time?
I was over at in Hampton at Conark, and then I did 3 years there in training in the S3 Army training. But I did a 3-year tour there, and then I did another tour in Germany. Went back to Grafenbeer, Germany, and you say Grafenbeer to an Army guy, they all go, "Oh no, not that." It was wet, muddy, cold, snow. For the field troops that would come up there for their tank qualification or artillery qualification, annual qualification, it was a bad place. They had field tents, but for the permanent party, it wasn't bad at all. We lived pretty good. We could hunt and fish, and we had German. We knew the Burgermeister, and we had our places to go eat.
Right.
So it was a good tour. But, and then that was about 20. I'd done about 21 years, and so of course, the regular Army, you miss making your promotion for full colonel. They called you in and say you're going to retire. So
right. I got you.
I was not selected for 06, and so I retired.
Okay.
But
so let me circle back real quick to Germany. That was Cold War.
Yep.
Your mission in Germany is to prepare for the Soviets.
Yeah.
Pending invasion.
We had. I was in Schweinfurt my first 3 years. I was in a 105 self-propelled battery.
Okay.
I worked up from forward observer to fire direction officer, executive officer. I was lieutenant. I didn't command a battery. I didn't do that until I got back to 82nd.
Right.
We would do war games where we would take up our positions on the border, and then of course the thing was that it wasn't the Russians, it was all of them. They had some 100 and some divisions when you put in all the Hungarians and everybody, Poles and Hungarians.
Right.
And when you looked at the difference in, they have 105 divisions, and we've got about, 5 or 6 American and 3 or 4 other. It didn't look like a very good setup. But
right.
No, we would practice that every year. We would retreat, and then we'd nuke them, and then we'd reestablish dominance. It was war games, and it put us. And we couldn't, in the winter when the fields were frozen, we could actually get off the roads because we didn't do any crop damage. Wherever you went in Germany, if you went off a road, there was a German standing there with a notepad. If you ran over a tree, you're going to have to pay for it.
Okay.
So we had to be very careful about crop damage. And
what about espionage? You guys warned about that?
No, we didn't have any.
No, none of that. No.
Nah,
Russian spies or infiltrators.
No, nothing along that line. Uh,
How real was that threat that the Soviets could invade? You
well, in
those numbers, I mean.
Yeah, in those days, it was pretty serious.
Yeah.
We took it very seriously. looking back on it, I don't think it was as serious as we thought it was.
Right.
But again, we were doing our part.
Yeah.
And I also now and then I'd be sent to Frankfurt and work at Corps headquarters, and we'd work in the setting up the thing with all the, you know. But no, we didn't. We thought if they come, we're in big trouble. Is what we thought.
Yeah. Right. So looking back on your wartime experience, how does that affect or shape your life?
3 years in Vietnam were probably the most interesting years. I saw a lot of people killed. I saw when we went back into Hue, I saw what people could do to each other. And I saw when the North Vietnamese took over Hue, they buried policemen and school teachers, and sometimes they didn't even bother to shoot them. They'd tie them up with commo wire, throw them in a ditch, and cover them up. And that affected me. It killed me on religion. I don't believe much anymore as far as that, because people can do what they do to each other. And of course now I see what the Russians doing in Ukraine, and it disturbs me. My father-in-law, my first wife was from Germany. Was German. Her father had fought in the First World War and the Second World War. He'd been a PSC. But what the Germans did when they went into Poland and was, they're very sophisticated, well-educated, cosmopolitan country, and yet they go crazy when they get in total control somehow. But yeah.
What advice would you give somebody that might watch this 50 or 100 years?
No.
What would you like them to know about your service?
Well, I did my job as best I could. I tried to help people, and of course I was also ready in combat to do what I had to do. As far as we were the 82nd, we fired a lot of artillery rounds and injured a lot of people, I'm sure. Or I hope we hurt some. But no, it's it's part of what we do. We got to defend our country, and we need good people. So I'd say when you get a lot of travel, I would have never been able to go to Germany or Asia or Hong Kong or Bangkok or all these places that were very interesting. So I enjoyed that part of it, the travel.
Good. Well, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime, I want to thank you for sitting down and telling us your story.
Okay.
It's very interesting. You have a different perspective than anyone else.
All right.
It's your story.
Yep, that's true.
And more importantly, I thank you for your service. It sounds cliche, but it matters.
Okay.
Your service.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.